Hey everyone, ready to dive into another amazing story? Before we start, make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of the exciting content coming up. And don't forget to comment on what stories you'd like to see here. Let's get into the story. Today's story synopsis. A planet called Phantom Star suddenly appears, transforming the animals and plants on Earth into monsters capable of wiping out humanity. As they face extinction, humans accidentally discover a way to enter Phantom Star and realize they can gain powers that could fight against the monstrous threats. In order to survive, the human race embarks on an era of exploration in Phantom Star. The humans on the star are attacked by a monster that easily overpowers and kills them. One of them warns the others about a cave where they can hide. The girl, desperately trying to escape, manages to hide temporarily behind a rock, but the monster soon finds her. Frozen in fear, all she can do is scream before the creature kills her. No ceremony for the poor girl. This is Phantom Star, a place far more dangerous than the protagonist expected. He had been told that after using the service exchange material, surviving on that planet for just 5 minutes would automatically complete the exchange. But since only ordinary people were there, he feared that lasting even that long would be difficult. His name is John Kai, and he is now beginning to understand the true scale of Phantom Star. This star appeared out of nowhere outside Earth 15 years ago. However, its sudden appearance did not cause any gravitational disasters due to its orbit. But after the star emerged, the animals and plants on Earth suddenly transformed into monsters called beasts, creatures so powerful that not even human technology could withstand them. Their arrival triggered widespread destruction. During this initial period of chaos, surviving humans discovered magical portals appearing across the planet. Anyone who entered these portals would be teleported to Phantom Star. When humans first set foot on Phantom Star, they found that it resembled a digital fantasy world. There, people could change professions, acquiring skills, conditions, and equipment that allowed them to grow stronger, as if they were characters in a game. Soon, they realized they could bring these abilities back to Earth. Humans in the real world began to grow so powerful that they could even fight beasts directly. If someone wanted to become stronger, they had to travel to Phantom Star and claim their own power. Those who ventured there were collectively called explorers. A funny term, perhaps pioneers would be more fitting. Anyway, after killing the girl, the monster charges toward the remaining survivors, wiping them all out, leaving the protagonist as the only human still alive in the area. Now he has no choice but to find a way to escape. During this moment, the protagonist questioned himself, had he really abandoned his family to come to Phantom Star only to die? Then he remembered his younger sister encouraging him to go, saying that she and their older brother would work hard to make up for his absence. His sister had endured great hardship from a young age just to pay for his journey to Phantom Star. Meanwhile, his older brother was still working tirelessly, despite having serious injuries from his job. If he couldn't save enough money for surgery within the next 2 months, he would die. Seizing the monster's attack as an opportunity, the protagonist dodged and leaped toward a cliff ahead of him. At that moment, he received a system message informing him that during his fall, he had already survived long enough to qualify for a profession change. As a result, he had unlocked a secret career in this world. He was now a gambler. He'd probably do great in poker. After plummeting from the massive mountain, he miraculously landed unharmed. Even the injuries he had sustained earlier were now completely healed. A notification appeared in his system, explaining that because his job transfer had been completed in time, all of his basic attributes had been enhanced, equivalent to being fully resurrected with maximum health. Then, emerging from within the notification, a mysterious woman appeared, congratulating him on his profession change and promising to introduce him to his new skills. The first skill was called Double Up, a talent that doubled any system reward or punishment he received. Additionally, there was a 1% chance of triggering a super double effect, which would multiply rewards and punishments by 10 times. The second talent was called Super Critical Hit, a skill that increased his maximum damage output by 200 times, though his initial critical hit chance was only 0.1%. Looking at his status, the protagonist noticed that his basic attribute points had increased to 36.00, which was unusual. Typically, after a job transfer, people only gained around 20 points. He asked the mysterious woman how he had achieved such a high number, and she explained that it was due to his Double Up talent, which doubled his attribute points after a profession change. As he walked, he came across the weapon the monster had previously used. That's when he remembered his original goal on Phantom Star, to change professions as quickly as possible and earn money for his brother's surgery. No matter how weak a profession might be in this world, it would still make more money than any job on Earth. However, he never expected to accidentally complete his job transfer and become a professional gambler. Looking at it from this perspective, maybe now he could earn the money for his brother's surgery faster and give his family a better life. Now that's what you call a real man? His new goal was clear. He had to reach the end of the beginner tutorial zone within 7 days. However, completing it successfully would be extremely difficult. The area was infested with monsters, and dying would cause the tutorial to fail, sending him back to Earth. Although dying on Phantom Star didn't necessarily mean he would be permanently expelled, re-entering the planet required an enormous price, one that only the rich could afford. Wealthy people from various countries could enter Phantom Star with ease, but for someone poor like the protagonist, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he failed, there would be no second chance. During his journey, he recognized a familiar scream. As he approached the source of the noise, he realized that someone was under attack. Deciding to hide behind a tree, he observed the scene and was shocked. It was his old friend of many years, Yuan Zhu. Right now, Zhu was surrounded by multiple earth serpents, extremely venomous snakes. If they bit someone, death was certain. His friend was trapped by 3 of them. The protagonist called out, telling Zhu not to be afraid. He was on his way. Then he rushed forward. Zhu, stunned to see him, froze in place. The protagonist slashed down a snake that had lunged at him, leaving Zhu completely shocked. Taking advantage of the moment, the protagonist attacked the remaining serpents while Zhu distracted them. However, this advantage didn't last long, and soon, the snakes turned their focus on him instead. Despite this, he fought them off with ease, further astonishing his friend. Eventually, the 2 of them defeated all the snakes together. Looks like we just witnessed a snake showdown. Get it? Now the protagonist checked his status screen. His profession's base strength was relatively low, but it was still enough to instantly kill a level 1 monster. Before he could process this further, Zhu suddenly hugged him, thanking him for the rescue and asking how he had gotten so strong. The protagonist replied that he was just lucky to have obtained the gambler profession and asked Zhu to keep it a secret. Zhu then mentioned that he had also acquired a great profession. He had become a martial artist. This surprised the protagonist, who now understood how Zhu had managed to survive against so many snakes. Martial artist was one of the top 5 professions on Phantom Star. However, since no one actually knew the total number of professions in this world, it was still a complete mystery. After arriving on Phantom Star, the first thing every explorer did was change professions. The type of profession a person received depended on how much money they had spent before entering the game. Wealthy individuals often invested millions in purchasing materials for a profession change, allowing them to instantly unlock a strong career upon arrival. On the other hand, poor players could only afford cheap materials, which often led to weak professions. Even worse, their profession was assigned randomly. Yet another thing that comes down to luck. The protagonist then asked his friend, "How did you manage to get such an expensive profession? Are you involved in loan sharks or something?" Zhu laughed and said, "It's a long story, but I'll tell you everything later." Kai then urged them to quickly gather the bodies of the snakes they had defeated, since he had heard that they could be sold for money. On Phantom Star, many items could be exchanged for currency. Kai also wanted to use this money to help his family. Any resources or equipment dropped on Phantom Star would automatically turn into cards, which could either be collected or sold. Judging by their battle with the Earth Serpents, it seemed like the gambler profession was even better than the martial artist profession. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the trees. She introduced herself as Su Nuanuan and admitted that surviving the tutorial alone was proving difficult. She asked if she could join them. The protagonist politely declined, explaining that they could barely protect themselves. However, she pleaded with them not to leave her behind, revealing that her profession was doctor. She could heal them, and if they encountered another venomous snake, she could extract its venom to enhance their weapon's attack power. Desperately, she begged once more, urging them not to abandon her. A completely understandable reaction. The protagonist then accepted her proposal, and they all introduced themselves, agreeing that they would now form a team and stick together throughout the tutorial. She thanked them, while Zhu leaned in and whispered in the protagonist's ear, asking if he had only accepted because she was pretty. The protagonist responded by threatening to crush him. Meanwhile, on Earth, inside a research facility, a scientist commented that the wristwatches given to the humans sent to Phantom Star were exceptionally well made. Thanks to them, they had been able to track the exact location of every explorer on the planet. At that moment, Instructor Su Lanlin entered the room, agreeing with the scientist about the quality of the watches. She then turned to Professor Li, asking how the newcomers were doing and inquiring about her younger sister. The professor began searching for the location of her sister's wristwatch, revealing that her sister was none other than Su Nuanuan. Upon realizing that her younger sister had joined a group, Instructor Su became furious. She had warned the rookies that forming a group early in the game would attract more monsters. 3 minutes later, the professor informed the instructor that her sister's group had encountered a beast known as a face human. She was immediately stricken with fear, as this monster could easily kill newcomers, and they had encountered not one but two of them. Even though death on Phantom Star was not as serious as on Earth, those who returned after dying often suffered severe mental trauma. This was the main reason she was worried about her sister. Once again, a completely understandable concern. Just as she was about to leave the room to try and help her sister, the professor stopped her, saying that Sue did not appear to be in danger. A moment later, he was stunned. The face-human beasts had already been killed. 3 minutes earlier, the protagonist group had been fleeing from the monsters. However, upon realizing that his teammates were not as fast as him, he worried that they would be caught. So he stopped running, allowing them to pass him, and then charged at the monsters, initiating the battle. Even though he landed a precise strike on one of them, the creature's health was too high, and he was unable to kill it in a single attack. Seeing that the protagonist was struggling against the monsters, his companions were in shock. Zhu in particular panicked, and at that moment, a memory surfaced in his mind. On Earth, in a residential area of a city, Zhu's mother was welcoming the benefactor who had provided the materials for her son's profession change. She confessed that she didn't understand why he had so much faith in her son. Despite being tall and strong, Zhu was incredibly shy. She firmly believed that if he ever encountered a beast on Phantom Star, he wouldn't even dare to fight. However, the man responded that he was well aware of Zhu's fears, but he had also discovered one important truth, and no matter how scared he is, if he sees someone in danger, he becomes a completely different person. Basically, a two-faced hero, but in a good way. Back in the present, upon seeing that the monsters were about to kill his friend, Zhu summoned his strength and attacked the beasts, managing to knock one of them far away. He then turned to the protagonist, demanding, "Are you trying to protect me because I look like a coward?" He continued, "We're brothers, and brothers always stick together." With that, he charged at the monster with all his strength. He successfully took down one of the beasts while the girl began using her medical abilities on the protagonist. As she treated his wounds, a memory surfaced in her mind. She remembered the day her father had died in battle against the very same type of monster, all because he didn't have a medical support unit by his side. Now that her teammates needed her support, she couldn't afford to abandon them and run away. She then finished using her powers on the protagonist, making him return to normal. He got up and remembered that she had said she could use the snake's bodies to extract venom. So he threw one of them to the girl so she could extract the venom and enhance her sword while healing Zhu. The girl was multitasking with mastery. She's really awesome. This was the only way the protagonist thought they could win. However, his attack still wouldn't be enough to kill the monsters. Looking at it from that perspective, the chance of victory would only reappear if all three were together. He then charged at the monsters again, and now the three of them were working as a team to defeat the creatures as quickly as possible. Finally, they managed to take down one of the beasts. The instructor, who was watching everything along with the professor, was notified that both spheres had been defeated by the rookies. She was very surprised as just one of them had managed to wipe out an entire group of novices. The professor added that his sister also had no killing abilities and the explorers in her team had low damage output. Observing the records, they concluded that Kai was most likely responsible for killing the creatures, but strangely, they couldn't determine his occupation. The team was happy that they had managed to defeat the creatures, and the girl commented that since they had the strength to fight them, they would probably be able to reach the end of the tutorial with ease. The protagonist told them not to rush ahead too much just yet. He then mentioned that points would be calculated once they finished the tutorial phase, and that if they reached the top 3 and highest scores, they would receive military equipment. It was said that these military-issued items were very good and would be a great help for rookies in their development on the Phantom Star. Now that they had the ability to kill monsters, they could earn points, and with more points, they had a chance of reaching the ranking. He then suggested that they start farming monsters first to rack up points and secure the military rewards. A great deal. A few hours later, they began farming. Zhu followed the protagonist's instructions and started shaking trees to lure out the snakes. When the creatures appeared, the team sprang into action. The rules of that star dictated that only those who killed a monster would receive experience points. Since the protagonist was the only one in the group with the ability to kill monsters, they collectively decided to let him gain the experience first. After a day, the protagonist received a message in the system congratulating him for eliminating 100 monsters, thus leveling up to level 2. As he did so, his double ability activated, granting him twice the points. He was happy to have completed this task, which had lasted an entire day. The team's medic congratulated him, and his friend, excited about the situation, asked how he planned to use his attribute points after leveling up. The protagonist replied that he had already used some, allocating 20 attribute points and still had 56 left, which wasn't bad. His friends were shocked by this, surprised at the amount he had since it was much higher than theirs. Zhu pointed out that this was a huge number, as a normal person leveling up usually gained only 10 points to distribute. The medic commented that since he had obtained 56 points at level 2, he seemed comparable to someone at level 4, which showed a massive difference. The protagonist explained that it was just because of his profession, which doubled rewards and improvements. However, he also explained that this wasn't entirely a good thing, as the negative effects and penalties were also doubled for him. The medic admitted she didn't fully understand but said that his profession seemed very powerful, while his friend commented that his martial artist profession couldn't even compare to it. Then, a woman who appeared to be an NPC from the game appeared and informed them that players would gain another skill from their profession on reaching level 2. But since his unlucky player ability doubled everything he received, the protagonist would gain 2 skills instead, like one of those 2-for-1 promotions. She then continued explaining that his first profession skill was called Phantom Love, which granted a 20% penetration effect bonus when throwing an item. Additionally, when throwing card-type items, the penetration effect increased by 200%, but the mental power consumption also increased by 100%. His second profession skill was called Phantom Eye Focus, which increased his visual range and ocular tracking ability by 50%, with the mental power consumption also increasing by 100%. The protagonist was pleased to gain these abilities but still didn't know how to use them. However, he commented that he was now stronger and told his friends that they could start farming monsters with higher experience points, which got everyone excited. After all, the stronger you are, the more XP you get. 2 days later, in the same room where the scientists were, the professor called for the instructor, pointing out that 2 days had passed and his sister was still alive. She responded that it now seemed like the team would survive and that the explorer named Kai was stronger than she had expected. That's when a soldier interrupted them, warning that the path the rookies were taking was about to become dangerous. He continued, explaining that the higher-ups had detected that Country L had sent infiltrators to invade the rookie area of their country this time. This was a rare large-scale invasion. The Supreme Commander entered the room, stating that they needed to act quickly and prepare for this situation. Seeing the commander there, the instructor realized that the situation was more serious than she had thought. The infiltrators were a group of people from Country L specialized in killing rookies from other countries while successfully concealing any involvement from their homeland. Meanwhile, as the protagonist group followed the trail, he suddenly stopped, sensing that something was off. He then grabbed his spear and hurled it toward the trees. His friends were confused at first, but seeing him run toward the spear, they followed. When they reached the spot, they saw that his spear had struck a giant boar right in the center. They wondered if he had the eyes of a hawk, to which he replied that was thanks to his skill. Not wrong. As they were moving away from the boar, a group of infiltrators emerged from the river beside them and quickly surrounded them. Their leader appeared after the others and stated that they only wanted all the rookies from Shenzhou to fail the test. The medic recognized them and said they were specialists in killing rookies. She also noticed that all of them were at least level 3, their leader being level 5. The protagonist wasn't too concerned about their numbers, but the fact that they had a level 5 among them worried him a bit, as he could only fight up to level 4 opponents with his current attributes. The infiltrators then decided it was time to attack and rushed at them. The protagonist ordered his companions to flee along with him while the enemy leader began pursuing them deep into the forest. The infiltrators split into pairs to chase each of them. The pair that was after the protagonist was just about to catch up when he suddenly vanished. They tried searching for him, but this only led them to fall into Kei's trap. He had been hiding, and whenever one of the criminals let their guard down, he threw his spear. Using this method, he had already managed to kill one of them. Feeling more confident knowing he only needed one strike to take them down, the protagonist stepped out from his hiding spot and revealed himself to the remaining infiltrator. The criminal opened his status screen to check how this rookie could be so strong and was shocked to see that Kai had 60 attribute points, while he, at level 3, only had a total of 45. Something didn't add up. The protagonist then threw daggers at the infiltrator's chest, easily killing him. The NPC who had appeared earlier returned and informed him that he had killed a criminal and could now collect the items left behind. She also told him he could choose whether to take the victim's experience points before everything disappeared. Since he had killed 2 level 3 criminals, he could collect 100 experience points from each. He decided to take the experience points knowing that he could take advantage of his skill, which doubled his score regardless of the situation. After collecting the points, he leveled up to level 3 and realized that if he focused on killing criminals instead of monsters, he could level up much faster. Now he had a total of 76 attribute points, while the invader's leader was level 5 of only 60 points. The protagonist finally had enough power to save his friends. His teammates were cornered by a large group of infiltrators. Zhu was severely injured after fighting multiple enemies at once, and the medic was healing him. The protagonist then stormed into the area throwing daggers at the criminals. He defeated them all, leaving only the group's leader standing. The leader couldn't figure out who was responsible for wiping out his subordinates. The protagonist emerged from the shadows again and threw his spear straight into the criminal's chest, defeating them all. With the situation now under control, he turned to his friends and asked how they were doing. The medic threw herself into his arms, saying that Ju was gravely injured and that she couldn't heal him enough. His dazed friend muttered that he probably wouldn't be able to stay by their side much longer this time. Poor guy wasn't tanking anything anymore. Zhu said his goodbyes, telling them that his adventures alongside his friends had been his best memories. During this emotional moment, the protagonist grew frustrated. He grabbed one of the defeated infiltrators and said he had intentionally left some of them barely alive so that Zhu and the medic could finish them off and instantly recover by gaining their experience points. Meanwhile, at the Research Institute in Country L, the infiltrators returned to Earth after being defeated by the protagonist. Back in the protagonist's country, the professor analyzed the data sent from the star and informed the instructor that his sister's group had likely encountered the invaders. The instructor became worried, thinking something bad had already happened to them. However, the professor pointed out that their levels had increased, indicating that they had successfully defeated the infiltrators who had surrounded them. The commander stood up from his chair and asked to see the data again. After analyzing it, he realized that they had already reached level 3, which meant they must have defeated the criminals. Leveling up twice in such a short time was nearly impossible through regular monster farming. They began speculating that Kai might have been the one who defeated the invaders. Now the protagonist team was reviewing their newly gained levels. Zhu had acquired a skill called Earthquake, which allowed him to knock enemies down easily. The medic had received an upgrade to her healing abilities. Almost a full-on universal healthcare system. Zhu then asked the protagonist if he could defeat the infiltrators as easily as he did, now that he was a level above them. Kai told him he was mistaken. He had already reached level 4 with a total of 96 attribute points, which was equivalent to a level 8 explorer. The protagonist explained that while he was luring the criminals into his trap, he had managed to kill 2 of them. On his way to the group, he took down 5 more, allowing him to jump from level 2 to level 4 almost instantly. They began thinking about what to do next and decided to ask the protagonist for his opinion. He responded that the captain he had killed earlier had mentioned they were part of the second team of invaders and proposed hunting down the rest of them. One day the prey, the next the hunter. A day later, in a forest within the novice area, another group of infiltrators was patrolling. They were discussing the second team's defeat at the hands of just 3 novices. The protagonist group was hiding behind a tree, waiting for the right moment to act. Yu asked Kai if he was sure about facing 9 level 5 opponents. Kai replied that if they didn't do it, other novices from their country would be killed by them. Without hesitation, he stepped out from their hiding spot to create a distraction. The infiltrators started chasing him, and once they reached an isolated area, he suddenly turned around and charged at them. Kai took advantage of his agility, dodging their attacks while waiting for his friends to arrive. One of the criminals decided to investigate why an explorer at a lower level than them was so fast. He quickly realized that Kai had 30 agility points, an unusually high amount for someone at level 4, considering that a level 5 fighter typically had at most 20 points. The leader of the infiltrators, realizing that it made no sense for someone with such high agility to only be dodging, ordered his group to retreat, realizing they had walked straight into a trap. That was when Zhu appeared, dropping from a height of 10 meters. Just before hitting the ground, he used his earthquake ability, sending the criminals flying. That was the protagonist's cue. He swiftly finished them off using his daggers. The classic quick and clean kill. The protagonist had finally reached level 5. A message appeared, notifying him of his level up. By eliminating the group of criminals, he had earned a total of 2,000 experience points, reaching the maximum level for the novice area. He informed his friends that he had left 4 criminals with low health and advised them to hurry up and finish them off to level up. Zhu asked what they would do next. The protagonist replied that since he had taken out the monsters earlier to gain points, now was their turn. Once they had enough points, they would head to the finish line. As they walked near the edge of the area, they spotted a dead faceless lying on the ground. The protagonist noticed a golden light surrounding them, and suddenly a golden creature struck 2 of them like a bolt of lightning. Just as it was about to attack the protagonist, Zhu shouted a warning. Despite its small size, it dealt massive damage. Size isn't everything, huh? The protagonist managed to catch it with his hand and realized it was a chubby little rat. The rat spoke, admitting that it had been caught due to its own mistake. Kai let it go and told it to attack him again to prove it. The rat tried dozens of times but failed miserably every single time, eventually surrendering. Kai picked up the rat and made it his pet. He then told his teammates that since they were close to leveling up, They should take advantage of the faceless corpse and absorb its experience points. Meanwhile, the mysterious figure arrived at the end of the novice tutorial zone and was met with the sight of a massive castle. Upon reaching the entrance, the figure was greeted by a trio of knights who congratulated them on making it that far. The initial guide was named Xia Tao, one of the knights. Xia congratulated them again on achieving explorer status, but mentioned that, unfortunately, someone had already arrived before them. The person admitted they weren't the first to arrive, but questioned whether they weren't the best one there. To prove their point, they revealed thousands of monster cards. He then introduced himself as the second young master of the Huangyi family and claimed that he would be the highest-ranking member of the Xuanwu Guild in the future. His name was Huang Wei. The knights were surprised by this revelation and murmured among themselves that his family was one of the top 10 in the country. It was no surprise that he was so powerful. Meanwhile, the protagonist group was walking through the forest. Kai commented that it was strange. They had been walking for a long time and had yet to encounter a single monster. He then jokingly asked if they were all scared of his rat. The healer agreed, suggesting that it was possible due to its overwhelming cuteness. Just then, the group stumbled upon an entire pack of wolves. In the center of the pack stood the area's boss, and they quickly realized they were surrounded. Zhu told the protagonist that he had heard rumors about this boss. It was the strongest creature in the novice zone, one that had never been slain. Anyone who encountered it was doomed to certain death. With no chance of escape, they decided to fight until the end. They had courage to spare. As the battle began, the protagonist charged toward the boss while his friend used his earthquake ability to stun all the monsters. During this opening, the healer used her skills to coat the protagonist's weapon with snake venom, making it even deadlier. He then activated his Phantom Eye Focus ability and Phantom Hand ability to hurl his enhanced spear toward the boss. The spear finally struck, but it failed to pierce the boss's skin. The wolves in the pack then resumed their assault on the group. Realizing that attacking together wasn't working, they needed to find another approach. At that moment, the little rat flew into a rage and started attacking all the wolves, taking down most of them with ease. Seeing this, the protagonist seized the opportunity to advance on the boss once more. As he did, he noticed a potential weakness. Perhaps the boss's defense had been affected by the pack's defeat. He took a gamble and hurled a dagger at it. Might as well try, right? This time, the dagger pierced the boss's skin, proving the protagonist's theory correct. Just as he was formulating a strategy in his head, a notification appeared. His attack had hit the critical damage multiplier, increasing his damage by 2,000 times. His entire group was stunned by the sudden turn of events. Moments later, a message congratulated him for defeating the novice area's boss. The remaining wolves in the pack seemed to be fleeing in fear. The protagonist then turned to his friends and asked if they could still fight. They confirmed that they could. He then pointed out that with the boss gone, the wolf pack was far weaker than before. Zhu and the healer were hesitant as they had been the only ones injured by the wolves earlier. When they voiced their concerns, the protagonist assured them that there was nothing to worry about and ordered them to finish off the remaining wolves. The group launched a coordinated attack, wiping out every last monster in the area. Once the battle was over, the protagonist told them that he had left several wolves with low health so that they could finish them off and gain experience points. His friends then asked what their next step should be. He replied that, considering how many points they had already accumulated, their next move was to reach the finish line. Might as well wrap this up as soon as possible. Upon arrival, they found themselves standing before a massive city. It was no surprise, it was the largest activity hub for people from their country within the Phantom Star. Suddenly, the rat started running off. The healer tried to warn the protagonist, but he calmly said it was fine, explaining that the little rat was simply enjoying its freedom. They were greeted by a knight who congratulated them on passing the tutorial. It was Xia Tao once again. The protagonist asked if he could see the rankings of the novices who had passed through. Just as the knight was about to respond, he was interrupted by Wei. Wei sneered, claiming it was quite the coincidence to run into the brother of that tramp who worked for his family, referring to the protagonist. Wei offers to show them the rankings, claiming that he was in first place, and they were at the bottom. The explorers around them called them losers and questioned how they dared ask about the rankings when they didn't have any points. Wei had the habit of using his brother's illness to humiliate others. Zhu interrupts and threatens him to keep his mouth clean. The protagonist stops him and apologizes to everyone there, saying that the rankings would be updated soon, as the top 3 would belong to their group. Sometimes you really have to show them who's boss. Everyone laughed at them, but then the protagonist and his companions revealed their monster cards, which had more points than anyone else's. Everyone was shocked, not just by the human-faced monsters, but also by the area's boss. The rankings were updated, and their group had taken the top 3 spots. The protagonist team wasn't done showing off. They then asked the knight if criminals they had killed counted as points, throwing dozens of L country watches. Wei argued that they were lying, claiming that no novices could have defeated criminals of that level. He also mentioned that there were no clandestines around, and the other explorers agreed with him. It was then that a chief commander interrupted, stating that the clandestines had appeared, but they hadn't had time to warn everyone. The commander explained that his superiors had sent him to reward those responsible for taking down the clandestines and pointed to the protagonist's trio. The explorers were stunned by the revelation. If that commander was here, it meant something huge had happened. The commander then addressed the protagonist, saying that as a reward for solving the crisis, the military had decided to make an exception and increase their equipment rewards. The more, the better, right? The original rewards for second and third place had been upgraded from B level to A level, and the reward for first place was upgraded from A to S level. In the Phantom Star, equipment was ranked from F to S, with F being the lowest quality and S being the highest. Generally, B and C ranked equipment were already of very high quality, and A and S ranked items were the dreams of any explorer. Wei was furious about the situation, especially because Kai had knocked him down from first place to fourth. He began to rant that it wasn't fair, and that something must be wrong with the ranking. He claimed that Kay's family were inferior people, and that there was no way they could be better than him. The protagonist asked if it wasn't enough that the military had come to verify the situation. He told Wei that he had warned him not to listen to his family again. Wei drew his sword and charged at him, saying that his brother was worse than a sick dog and his sister was just a servant. He claimed that he was merely a bastard whom he beat. He then said that Kai should already know that his sister still worked as a maid in his house and warned him to be careful, or he would have intimate relations with her. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist drew his spear, charged at Wei, and pierced his chest. Another quick win for him. Wei, lying on the ground, asked how Kai dared attack him and questioned if he knew who he was dealing with. The protagonist activated his ocular ability, making his eyes glow, and responded that Wei had threatened his family, so he no longer cared who he was. He charged at him again, saying that family was the most important thing to him, and if anyone dared touch them, no matter who they were, he would take action. We tried to beg him to stop, but the protagonist ignored him, and this time struck directly at his heart with the spear. A message appeared saying that Kai had successfully killed the level 1 explorer Wei and asked if he wanted the remaining 6 experience points from the body. The protagonist declined, stating that it was too small an amount. The surrounding explorers were shocked that he had killed a member of the Hawaiian family and warned him about the power of his family's guild there. The commander interrupted, telling them to calm down, as it was Wei who had started the provocation and Kai had only defended himself, and ordered them to put an end to it. The commander called the protagonist and his group to follow him to collect their rewards. Upon arriving, he apologized for the delay and showed them the equipment the military had given them. As they opened the boxes, they encountered their rewards. The medic had received a life jade, which was the starting equipment that the medical class of the Star dreamed of obtaining. The commander explained that this jewel added 15 points to physical and mental powers and had a bonus effect on healing. An extremely complete jewel. Zhu opened his box and found a leather armor, which he immediately wore. The commander explained that it was the black stone rhinoceros armor, which increased his defense and strength by 16 points each and also reduced damage by 16%. He commented that it was high-quality equipment with great offensive and defensive points. Kai opened his box and found unidentified equipment. The commander explained that he needed an identification card to view the equipment's details. Handing the card to the protagonist, he explained that the highest quality equipment required such a card. When the protagonist used the card on his reward, he found 9 S-level daggers. These daggers increased his strength, penetration, and agility by 9 points each and had a special effect that increased his critical damage hit rate from 10% to 90%. The commander, seeing that it was a critical damage weapon, warned that this damage for the novices was still low and claimed that the weapon wasn't as good as the rewards his friends had received. Zhu asked if it was a prank on his brother, and the medic asked if he could exchange her equipment. She was interrupted by the protagonist, who said that there was no need for a change and that he definitely wanted that weapon. Are you enjoying the story so far? Then make sure to leave a like to show some support and comment on what you think. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories, which are also amazing. The equipment wasn't a prank for him, but rather the best equipment possible, as his critical damage wasn't like the others. It was 200 times greater. But unfortunately, his critical hit chances were still very low, and if he encountered a stronger enemy, he would probably die before managing to use it. This was his only difficulty with such an attack. But these daggers he had received increased his critical hit chance by 10%, so on his 9th attack, he would have a 90% chance of landing a guaranteed critical hit. The commander then said that if he liked the weapon, there was no reason to change it. He also told them that since they had finished the tutorial, they could return to Earth if they wished. He told the protagonist that he wanted to remind him in private that someone would probably come looking for him next time and advise them to be careful when heading home. A warning from a friend is like advice from your mom. Now back on Earth, the protagonist didn't expect to go through the novice tutorial so quickly and wondered how his brothers would react when they found out. As he approached his building, he noticed luxury cars in the parking lot. Upon entering his apartment, he found several members of the Huang family waiting for him. One of them said he had heard about his great performance in the novice tutorial. Then two people grabbed him by the arms. A man sitting stood up holding a baton and said that his brother, who had been killed by him in the Ghost Star, had returned and needed to be sent for psychological treatment. He continued, saying that he should know the Huang family was one that meddled with others and no one dared to mess with them. He then claimed that while he could keep Y offline for a month, he could keep him down forever and tried to hit him with the baton. Just as the baton was about to strike him, the apartment door flew open and hit the two men holding his arms in the head, knocking all three Huang family members down. A commander then entered the apartment, saying that he had already asked someone to remind him to be careful when going home and questioned why he hadn't taken that advice seriously. Behind the commander was the instructor, who was the sister of the protagonist's friend. She carried a document stating they were there to resolve military matters. The family members were shocked to realize there were military personnel there, especially since they were important. The commander explained that he was there for Kai and warned them that they had offended someone they shouldn't have. He then had the family members arrested, justice being served at least once. The protagonist thanked the commander for saving him, but still couldn't understand why they had done that. The commander told him not to be upset and said they had been looking for him for a reason. He explained that in the novice tutorial, he, Zhu, and Su had performed excellently, and his friends had been invited to join the military. He had come there to invite the protagonist as well and finally said he had a new profession. The instructor asked if he knew what an emergency meant for a new profession. There were many types of professions for explorers in the Ghost Star, and each explorer would switch services every 20 levels. With each service switch, the explorer's attributes and abilities would change, with some becoming stronger and others weaker. Consequently, many professions became useless after advancements. The goal was to find stronger combat powers, and military explorers explored new professions. Now the protagonist seemed to have a very strong profession, so the instructor asked if he would like to join a new military career. Couldn't let this fish slip from his net. The instructor continued, saying that they didn't intend to force him into it and apologized, explaining that before coming there, they had investigated his family's information and learned that his brother was sick. She continued, saying that if he joined the military career now, the military would not only protect his family, but also cover all of his brother's medical expenses. The commander and the instructor then left, and as they were leaving, the commander asked the protagonist if he went to the Ghost Star with the goal of paying for his brother's medical expenses. If he accepted the offer, he should appear at the armed forces the next day. The protagonist quickly responded that he declined the offer. The military personnel were shocked by his response, and he explained that he knew joining the armed forces was a good thing, but that was only for professions with certain future strength development like his friends. But he was different. He had a different profession. He reminded them of when the drunkard profession had appeared, and how the military had claimed it was of high value at the time. The military provided strong assistance for those who had that profession, and the holders had much success. But when they discovered that the drunkards weren't very useful, they abandoned them. He explained that this time he was too excited and had let his guard down. He hadn't expected the Huang family to ignore his image and take such action. He said that he and his brothers would move to an area not controlled by this family as soon as possible. He thanked the military for their help, but his family had been living together for more than 10 years and was still used to having their fate shaped by their own hands rather than relying on the protection of others. Details like these are crucial for a family like theirs. The instructor tried to convince him, saying that humanity was at the end of times and his profession could bring huge changes to all of mankind. She claimed that humanity needed him now and he couldn't think like this. He apologized and said that he wasn't that great and all he wanted was to protect his family and keep them safe. The instructor tried to insist more, but she was interrupted by the commander, who told her to forget it, saying he understood what the protagonist was trying to say. The habits formed by more than 10 years of life experience couldn't be changed in a day or two, but Kai should know that his brother didn't have much time left. In this apocalypse, fighting alone wouldn't work. He then proposed a bet. For the next month, the military would continue protecting his family from the Huang family's pursuit. If Kai could gather enough money for his brother's surgery in a month and prove he could protect his family, the military would respect his decision not to join the armed forces. But if he failed, the military would cover his brother's medical expenses to help him stay alive, and Kai would have to join the military. The protagonist smiled and accepted the offer. Now analyzing this bet, he knew he had to return to the Ghost Star as soon as possible to get the money for his brother's surgery. When leaving the apartment, he left a letter for his brother saying he would be going back to the Ghost Star. In addition, because of what the Huang family was doing, the three of them couldn't live in a place like that anymore. They needed to move to a safer area. So this time, the mission to return to the Ghost Star would be tough, but the next time he came back, he would have enough money. At least there was that silver lining. Back in the Ghost Star, after passing the novice tutorial, his adventure officially began. The protagonist had changed his clothes in his sales area and could now finally make money by killing monsters. Anyway, if new players wanted to make money in the Ghost Star, they had to join a guild since the monsters there were too powerful for one person to defeat alone. New explorers had to join a guild to fight monsters as a team. A guild is like a big team, and after joining, new members can follow the team's members to fight monsters and level up. When the protagonist entered a place that helped players join guilds, he said he wanted to join one. The girl in charge of the place apologized, saying he couldn't join any at the moment. When asked why, she explained that since he had offended the Huang family, he was now on the blacklist of all the guilds. So unless something unexpected happened, he would probably have to fight in the Ghost Star alone in the future. Kai was now wandering freely through the Ghost Star when someone called out to him, asking if he was worried about where he should go to fight monsters. When he turned to listen, he came face to face with a girl who claimed to be a fortune teller and said she could tell him the best place to go, for just 100 coins per reading. He looked into her eyes and refused, saying he was an atheist. As he started to walk away, she asked him not to leave, claiming she could bargain down to 80 or 30 coins, or even offer it for free. When he heard the word free, he appeared in front of her, saying that since it was free, there was no reason not to be superstitious at that moment. What a difference a freebie makes, right? She was a bit frustrated that he only agreed because it was free, but didn't mind as it was just a test of skill. She then used her ability, summoning a large tarot clock, and began speaking, saying that he was in crisis now and that if he wanted to get out of it, he should go to the Valley of Kings. The protagonist started analyzing the reading she had made and realized that he was indeed in crisis since he was being pursued by the Huang family. Consequently, the first choice for new players from levels 1 to 10 to venture would be Ash Plains, but there was a high probability that the Huang family would send someone to that area to look for him. The Victoria Peak Road, however, was a place that only explorers above level 15 could enter, and if he went there, he would most likely die. That left the Valley of Kings an area above level 10, but with his current strength, he would be able to handle the challenges there, and the Huang family probably hadn't thought of sending their thugs there due to his level. Since the Huang family wouldn't let him join a guild, he would face the challenges of the Ghost Star alone, and the Valley of Kings was his first destination. He thanked the fortune teller and left. She wondered why he was going to the Valley of Kings alone, as she had meant for him to go with a group, and she didn't really know much about that place. But since it wasn't her concern, she just hoped he wouldn't come back and give her a bad review. Virtual stars matter sometimes. Now walking through the Valley of Kings, the protagonist wondered if there would be strong monsters there. His thoughts were interrupted by a loud roar, and he noticed a group fighting against a giant gorilla monster. The monster was level 11, and the group was level 10. They believed that if they tried their best, they could defeat it. The protagonist watched, wondering if he could defeat one of them alone. He was then surprised by the presence of 3 of those monsters chasing him. One was level 12, another was level 13, and the most dangerous one was level 14. The group had defeated the first monster and was celebrating when they were surprised to see the protagonist fighting all 3 at the same time. As he dodged the creatures, he wondered if he had accidentally entered gorilla territory. One of the group members asked if they should help the man, but the group leader said that the person was probably just trying to act tough by fighting more than one at a time, and if they helped, they would die. The group was then shocked to see the protagonist defeat a level 12 monster alone while they struggled even as a group to kill a lower level one. Kai now had a higher critical hit rate than before and began attacking another gorilla, defeating the level 13 monster. He started gaining ground against the last monster, the strongest one, and when he found an opening, he threw his daggers to ensure a higher critical hit, getting a total critical bonus and defeating the level 14 creature. Another quick win for the books, and this time with a critical hit. The group who had been watching the fight was stunned that he managed to kill all 3 alone, as it would have been difficult even for a team of more than 2 people to do that. The protagonist didn't expect the monsters there to be that strong, but at least now he had 3 high-level monster cards, and it wasn't too difficult to kill monsters alone. In the Ashy Plains, a squad from the Huang family was searching for Kai, but couldn't find him there. All of them were level 20, including 3 martial artists, a medic, and a soldier. After failing to find him, they went to the fortune teller, saying they had heard she was the last person who had seen Kai. She could only ask what they wanted to do with him. At least she showed some empathy. The squad members questioned her if she didn't already know about it. Kai had offended the Huang family, and they were sent to avenge that. She then responds that he had gone to the Valley of Kings and they could find him there. They let her go, claiming that if she lied, they would come back to kill her. People in the area were observing that this was the Falcon Squadron, the best of the family's forces, and if they had sent people of that level, the guy they were looking for was definitely dead. The fortune teller claimed that people who were rude to her didn't know the truth, and she secretly told them a prediction. She had discovered what would happen when they visited Kai. They would all meet their deaths. One day later, in the Valley of Kings, the protagonist had just defeated a level 16 gorilla monster and reached level 6. A mysterious group appeared, asking if he would like to join them. The leader claimed they were hunting these gorillas along with other teams, and if he won, he would get some rewards. The protagonist asked if he could join their group since he was alone, and the leader replied that it was fine since they just needed one person. Suspicious, but okay. They all went together to the location where they claimed there was an elite treasure chest hidden, and there were 4 gorillas guarding the entrance. They laid out the plan for him, which was to distract one of the 4 gorillas so each team could face one alone. The protagonist thought about the proposal since he had heard that the chest they were after was known for having many good items. He started to wonder if there was another way to get the chest. Facing such a powerful monster, which could only be defeated in a group, was the secret plan these people had for him, not coming back alive and sharing the treasure among themselves. They then put the plan into action, and the protagonist lured one of the gorillas toward him. The attributes of these elite gorillas were many times higher than those he had faced before. If a normal explorer went there, they would die easily, but he was no ordinary explorer. The protagonist threw his daggers at the gorilla, killing it. He was surprised since he hadn't expected such a high-level monster to be defeated by his super-critical attack. He then took advantage of the others fighting and sneaked into the cave the gorillas were guarding. When he saw the treasure, he went toward it, happy that it had been easier than expected. However, as he got closer, he heard breathing above him, and then a giant gorilla attacked him. It was an Earth Elemental Gorilla, level 20. The protagonist managed to dodge its attack. He threw his daggers, but even hitting its eye, he couldn't cause any damage. After analyzing the monster's stats, he saw it had 23 defense points and his daggers only had 9, so they weren't enough to deal direct damage. The gorilla attacked again, and this time he couldn't dodge. He took a direct hit. If it were real life, I'd love to see a result. If he died in the Ghost Star, he would receive a penalty that would restrict him from entering for an entire month. If that happened, it would mean he had lost the bet with the commander, which meant he and his brothers would have to join the armed forces. Then a memory overtook his mind. His older brother carried him in his arms after they had been attacked by monsters on the battlefield of the Earth. Remembering this, the protagonist wouldn't allow himself to faint because his older brother had risked his life to save him and his sister in the monster battlefield. He couldn't be defeated there. The protagonist gathered all his energy and threw all his daggers directly into the gorilla's mouth, defeating it. Finally, the treasure belonged to him. Half an hour later, the group that had invited him had finally defeated the 3 gorillas. They all celebrated their victory, thinking the protagonist had likely died, leaving them with one less person to share the treasure. They then entered the cave, only to find that there was no treasure and nothing else inside. They began questioning what had happened. Then one of the group members remembered seeing the protagonist sneaking into the cave. They asked him why he hadn't mentioned it before, and he responded that he didn't think the protagonist would survive. The groups then began questioning the leader who had gathered them there, and he became very angry for being outsmarted by a guy they had also planned to outsmart. Ironically, the betrayal that hurt came from a guy he was planning to betray himself. When they opened the chest, they were faced with an absurd amount of treasures. In addition to the treasures, there was also equipment. While picking up the rare gems, the protagonist found a strange glove and put it on. Once he put it on, he felt stronger. When he left to equip his new gear, he encountered a group of level 18 Earth Elemental Gorillas. The protagonist was a little concerned since he had previously had difficulty dealing with just one of them, and now there were 4, which would make things more complicated. He tried using the same strategy he had used with the previous monster and threw his daggers into one of their open mouths. However, when the gorilla saw the daggers, it immediately closed its mouth. These gorillas, unlike the others, knew they needed to protect their mouths when attacked. He then noticed that the gorillas began to catch fire constantly. I wonder what the smell of a barbecue like that would be. He was surprised when the monsters that were on fire exploded from the intense flames coming from their bodies, and a system message appeared notifying him that he had defeated 4 gorillas. The protagonist then realized that when he saw the monsters taking damage from the fire, the damage points increased from 10 to 2,000 instantly. He then assumed that the gloves had enhanced his abilities, increasing his critical damage. Since it was widely known that most monsters didn't have fire resistance, his damage could completely bypass their defenses. That night, after discovering the power he had with these gloves, he went out to hunt all the strong gorillas in the valley. By the end of the night, he had managed to kill dozens of those giant gorillas and finally leveled up. He also collected 10 elite chests along with monster cards, and he would be able to sell everything for a lot of money. It was a bit lonely playing alone. He really missed his friends. He didn't know what they were doing now, but if they were with the army, they were probably doing something better than he was. In another part of the Valley of Kings, his friends lamented that someone had defeated all the gorillas in the valley. Zhu commented that they had been there for a few days and still hadn't found a single gorilla. Sue said she really missed Kay's efficiency in helping them kill monsters. All good things come to an end. They were interrupted by a person who told them not to repeat those words of encouragement. He added that the reason they were there was that they were capable of defeating monsters on their own. He told them he had brought them there to train, not to listen to their complaints. They then went off to search for another gorilla, but the two still missed Kai. 3 days later, the squad that had been pursuing the protagonist was now in the Valley of Kings, finding it amusing that they had only encountered normal gorillas during their time there. One of them said that defeating these normal monsters was very easy for them. While they were talking, they were interrupted by a group claiming to have seen the lone man defeat 3 giant gorillas by himself. One squad member remarked that it wasn't anything special, but it might seem impressive to a low-level person like him. He then asked if they had seen Kai around, and the person replied that it was a coincidence because the man who had defeated the 3 giant gorillas by himself was the very person they were looking for. The squad laughed at him, telling him not to say such nonsense since there was no way a level 5 person could defeat monsters of that level alone. He then told them that if they didn't believe him, that they could go and find the person who had just left the Valley of Kings. The squad got excited upon learning that he was nearby and followed his trail, almost like dogs. This time, the exit from the Valley of Kings was surrounded by people, all complaining that they hadn't found any gorillas there. One of them mentioned hearing that the forest had caught fire, killing all the gorillas, and now they would have to wait for an update before going to search again. The protagonist was now tallying up everything he had accomplished in that place. He had killed all the gorillas in 3 days, leveling up from level 5 to level 10. He had also collected 19 elite treasure chests, so now he could return to Shenzhou and sell the items for money. As he was about to leave, someone shouted his name and told him to wait. The squad had finally caught up with him. The people around were surprised by the presence of such a high-level squad just to look for one person. The protagonist asked if they were looking for him, and the squad leader asked if he didn't remember offending someone special during the newbie training. They then charged at him in a group attack. The protagonist dodged and told them that it was Wei who had attacked him first during the tutorial, and he was just retaliating. He then asked if they really wanted to fight him. The squad said they didn't care who was right or wrong, just about the money they would make from killing him. The protagonist then replied that since they chose to cause trouble for the wrong fortune, he activated his fire gloves and attacked them. When he hit them with his flames, they laughed at the small amount of damage they took. Poor guys laughing before the outcome is always funnier for those who are just watching. While everyone laughed at the small flame that came out of his gloves, the protagonist asked what would happen if he made the fire do a little more damage. The protagonist's total critical hit chance was activated, causing everyone hit by the flame to burn. A system message then appeared saying that the Explorer Kai had defeated the Falcon Squad and absorbed their experience. Everyone present was stunned by what he had just done. One of them said that if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it if someone had told him. Everyone there thought he was the god of fire. He became a deity after defeating his hunters. I wonder if there's a lion considered a deity somewhere. The protagonist celebrated gaining 2 extra levels as he left the area. He then headed to the city to sell the things he had collected. The local shopkeeper wondered if she had really waited all day just to serve a poor rookie. The protagonist told her he didn't have much to sell and asked her to calculate the total value of everything he had. When she saw the number of monster cards he had, she was surprised. And when she saw the 19 elite chests, she was even more surprised. She then told him not to worry and that he was lucky to be dealing with a bestseller in the area and began calculating the price of everything he had shown her. The shopkeeper then said that the monster cards could be sold for 10,000 coins and the elite treasure chests could be sold for 170,000, so the total would be 180,000 coins. These coins were a form of payment used in the Ghost Star, and 1 Ghost Star coin could be converted to 10 Shenzhou coins, which was enough to cover his brother's medical expenses. Now the bet he had made with the commander had been settled, and he wouldn't have to join the armed forces. As he was walking, someone called out to him, claiming to be the person who had read his fortune for free the last time. When he turned, he found the fortune teller he had met earlier. She said she was right in recommending that he go to the Valley of Kings last time. He confirmed, saying that he had gained many things from that prediction. She then asked him for a small favor, and he agreed, saying he owed her one. The girl introduced herself as Hu Yan and asked if she could join his team. The protagonist then left, showing no interest in having anyone in his team. She then told her story, saying she had been just a useless character discarded by the military. She asked him to forget that and mentioned that she knew he liked free things, so she offered him one last prediction, since this was probably the last time she would enter the Ghost Star. He then asked her if she was poor too and if she wanted to stop making money there. She replied that she wanted to, but she couldn't, since even the team didn't want someone with her profession in their ranks. When the military determined that her profession's base power was too strong, they took advantage of that and chose her. When she reached level 20, she changed to her current profession, but that advantage the military had mentioned was just an initial bonus compared to other base professions, and her power varied depending on space and people. You're crazy, it's not worth it. The military then discovered that people with her profession didn't have any practical skills they could use, so they gave up on them all. And since most of them were weak, no team wanted to invite them. Since she didn't have a team to fight monsters with, she spent her days doing nothing in the Ghost Star. If she returned to Earth, she would only end up with hard physical work to do. The protagonist understood what she was going through and said that his brother's health had deteriorated because of that kind of work. He commented that a girl like her wouldn't be able to endure it. She said she had no choice since she had younger siblings on Earth and was the only pillar for her family and couldn't give up. When she said that, the protagonist thought about his own brother saying the same things. He thought to himself that his older brother was just like her, wanting to make money in the Ghost Star, but when he adopted his sister and him, his brother feared that no one would be able to take care of them, so he gave up the opportunity to go to the Ghost Star and ended up doing hard labor on Earth. Here's a woman with a capital W. As she was about to leave, she asked if he wanted her equipment, since she wouldn't need it anymore, as she would have to return to her normal life. She said goodbye. The protagonist asked her to wait and said his name was John Kai. He told her he would leave now, but not permanently, and that if he could find her the next time they both entered, he would form a team with her. She asked if he was serious, and he confirmed, saying that if he were lying, he would never make money again in his life. She cried with gratitude and hugged him. Back on Earth, the protagonist tells his siblings in their apartment that they don't need to work anymore and claims to have made enough money. His younger sister asks where he got the money from and questions if it was illegal. He replies that he earned all his money in the Ghost Star and tells her that his older brother has his surgery scheduled for tomorrow and she can go back to school and study hard. The older brother asks if this was difficult for him, and the protagonist responds that it was nothing compared to the hard work his older brother had to go through to raise him and his sister. He asks him not to worry since he had worked hard before, and now with his skills, he'll be able to give them a good life. They then toast to their achievement. Every achievement should be celebrated, no matter how small. While drinking, the protagonist receives a call. When he answers, the commander asks if he's free, as he had won the bet. He lets him know he would send someone to pick him up to show him something later and asks him to remember this. He had been taken to the city where he was born, which was now completely destroyed by monsters. When he found the commander, he asked why he had been brought there but was interrupted by a roar and a giant creature fighting against the squadron. The commander then explains that explorers change and improve their abilities every 20 levels. Explorers from levels 1 to 80 could grow stronger after advancing in their services, but their powers could only be used in the Ghost Star. However, it was different for the extraordinary ones. When explorers reached levels 81 to 120 and attained this position, their powers that could only be used in the Ghost Star could now be used on Earth. Now it's worth it. The commander tells the protagonist that the situation for humanity isn't looking good at the moment and asks him not to forget to be prepared for danger. He says that since the protagonist won the bet, he would keep his promise and not force him into the armed forces. He also told the Huang family to leave him alone. The commander claims that it was strange for him to pay so much attention to someone, but it was because he trusted his intuition. His intuition told him that the protagonist would become a strong person, and in the future, he would be so powerful that all of Shenzhou would need his help. He then says that in the end times, his only concern should be protecting his family, and that despite everything, joining the armed forces would only mean entering a battlefield, and the battlefield was always dangerous. But every man shares responsibility for the country's fate, and someone in this world must face those monsters. The commander says that he would probably die one day on a battlefield, but as a person from the country of Shenzhou, if he could die for his country or for people like him, he would gladly do so. He continues, saying that he wouldn't interfere with his choice, but if a country were in danger in the future, he would just hope that the protagonist would take care of things. After this, the protagonist rested on Earth for a few days before returning to the Ghost Star. He hadn't expected the commander to think so highly of him and wondered if he would really become so strong in the future. He then focuses and says that, first, he needed to take care of himself. The gorillas in the Valley of Kings weren't a challenge anymore, and it was time to hunt the next monster, the Banshee Ghost. A truly terrifying one, by the way. The fortune teller was sleeping while standing with a sign that said not to disturb her as she was waiting for her captain. The protagonist then calls out to her, asking if she had been waiting for him since he left. She is happy that he has returned and says she knew he would come back, mentioning that she had been waiting for a few days. She continues by saying that since they would now be fighting monsters together, she found a great teammate for them and thought he would be very useful for both. The protagonist says he would be a great help during their journey and jokes, asking if he wasn't a drunk. At that moment, a man introduces himself as Ruin Yu and says that his profession is being a drunk. The protagonist runs away, saying he didn't want him. Yan then starts convincing the protagonist to accept him into the team, claiming that he was a hardworking and obedient person who would also cook for them, give massages, and was willing not to take any resources earned by the team. For a stinky person like him, that last argument was enough. After hearing the last part, the protagonist gladly accepts him into the team. He then speaks to him, saying he's very happy to have someone so talented in his group, and now as their captain, he had no choice but to lead them to fight the Banshee Ghost. Back in the Valley of Kings, they're in the land of the elite monster, the Banshee Ghost, who is level 20. The protagonist starts telling his team members that this ghost was many times stronger than the gorillas, and as soon as they exposed her, she would be killed instantly. He asks them to stay silent. He tells them to remember that only attacks within a 10-meter radius could hurt her, so they should keep quiet and look for opportunities to get closer. The protagonist starts hearing someone calling him. He asks Xian to speak more quietly. He hears it again and asks her again to be silent. She then says she wasn't saying anything, so when he turned around, he saw that his teammate was already drunk and making a lot of noise, drawing the Banshee's attention. Their group was then hit by the Banshee's attack, which left them with a fear status. They all started to freeze in front of the monster. It was then that the drunk man stood up and asked how someone so beautiful could be there and threw himself toward the Banshee. When he was on top of her, he said it must have been fate that brought them together, and this time it was the ghost who was afraid. The negative statuses were removed, and the protagonist took the opportunity to enter her attack range and threw his fire-imbued daggers at her. Just as the drunk man was about to kiss the ghost, she exploded into flames due to the protagonist's attack. Their team had managed to defeat the monster. The drunk man then became frustrated and started crying, claiming that his wife had been killed, and without her, he would never be able to love again for the rest of his life. The protagonist, taking advantage of his lamenting, asks Yan if he went crazy when he got drunk, and she confirms, saying that sometimes it could be useful, like it was now. She then goes to collect the elite chest from the Banshee in her card. The protagonist begins to question why the drunk man had been hit by the Banshee's attack and didn't suffer any negative effects. He comments that one of the things people didn't like about drunks was that they lost control of their consciousness when they got drunk, but in this situation it didn't seem so bad. While the protagonist is thinking about how to use this advantage of his drunk teammate, Yen appears with the Banshee's reward chest and wonders why her captain has a demonic smile. They then set off to hunt another ghost. His fun seemed to be their terror. Upon arriving at a location where the other guy was, they both send their drunk teammate ahead, and he once again throws himself into their arms. The protagonist once again throws his fire-imbued daggers and interrupts the kiss his teammate was about to give the monster. He's once again despondent that his wife was killed again, and they move on to the next monster before he sobers up. 3 hours later, they had already defeated over 11 Banshees, and the drunk man lamented each one. Finally, they reached the 35th ghost. The protagonist celebrated that they had managed to use his teammate's drunken state for 35 different monsters, thus killing all the Banshees in the Valley of Kings. After killing the 35 Banshees, the protagonist had reached level 14, and the only price paid was the broken heart of his teammate. Yan says they were just helping train Ruin's mental health for a future breakup, and the drunk man calls them monsters. That wasn't all. The protagonist also managed to collect 2 Banshee skill cards that granted extra abilities. The first ability was called Rain Prayer, and it was used by people with a strong mindset to summon a storm. He then realizes that since his companion was level 29, her mental strength was greater than his, so he hands the card over to her. And that was today's story. Did you like it? Then leave a like, drop a comment about what stories you'd like to see next. I'm always watching and responding to comments. I bring the best stories, so don't forget to subscribe, share with friends who also enjoy manhwas, and see you in the next video. We're together.